Hey guys, doing another What's Next. This is on WBA Interim Middleweight Champion Chris Eubank Jr. of the United Kingdom. Eubank last fought in December when he captured the vacant WBA Interim title when he scored a second-round TKO win over Matt Korobov, as Korobov basically threw out his shoulder in that fight and was forced to retire with that shoulder injury. It was deemed a technical knockout win because Korobov could not resume, so that's why it was deemed that. But it was kind of disappointing because Eubank really didn't get a chance to prove he was the better man in that fight. They were barely a round plus into the fight, so really we didn't know who the real winner was. But he got the win, he got the interim title out of that. So going to be interesting to see what Chris Eubank Jr., what's on the table for him next. So let's run up through the top 10 and see what's next for WBA Interim Middleweight Champion Chris Eubank Jr. Nothing has been talked about as of yet for him, so let's start with the top 10 and see what's possible. Number 1, WBA Super Champion Canelo Alvarez. Alvarez is already signed on to fight Billy Joe Saunders next. That's not 100% that's still going to happen, but if he doesn't get Billy Joe, I think Canelo would be fully okay with taking on Triple G right out the gate. So I don't think Chris Eubank's on his radar at all, so I don't see it. Number 2 is Triple G Gennady Golovkin. Not going to happen next. Triple G is making an IBF mandatory defense, and then he's got Canelo after that. Chris Eubank not on his radar. Number 3, undefeated WBC champion Jermall Charlo. Now these guys are both with the PBC, so I think it is possible. But I don't think it's going to happen because I think Charlo is either going to get mandated by the WBC to defend his title against number 1 contender Sergey Derevyanchenko, who's also with the PBC. But I also think that's probably the fight he wants more anyways. So he is an option. I think Eubank is probably his second best option, and it could happen. And I wouldn't be surprised if it gets announced, but I'm leaning towards the less likely because I think Charlo's going to face Derevyanchenko. Number 4, Sergey Derevyanchenko. Now, I do think this fight's possible if, for some reason, Charlo gets another fight and needs another fight. But I think Charlo wants the big names, so I think he's either choosing Derevyanchenko or Eubank next. So there is no in-the-middle guy, in my opinion, for Charlo. It's going to be one of those two guys. So that's what I think happens. Number 5 is undefeated WBO champion Demetrius Andrade. I think this fight is possible. I know Andrade is facing Liam Williams likely next in a mandatory fight, but I think Eubank just might wait around. If he can't get a big fight, he might wait around and just say fuck it and fight Andrade. Now I'm leaning towards the less likely that this fight happens because it's Matchroom going head-to-head with the PBC here, and I think they're going to want to line Eubank up better with somebody better because Andrade is high risk. But Eubank is also not afraid to fight people, and he's sick of not getting big fights. So he might get desperate and say fuck it and go after it. I'm leaning towards the less likely, but I do think it could happen. Now, number 6 is Eubank. Number 7 is WBA regular champion Ryota Murata. I do think there's a chance of this fight. The reason why is, again, Murata's a WBA regular champion right now. Eubank's the interim champion for that belt. I don't know the last time a mandatory fight was made, but Murata is coming off of a win in an optional defense. His next fight was supposed to be a mandatory rubber match with Rob Brandt. But Rob Brandt was also supposed to fight in January in an interim fight before that, and he had to pull out with an injury. Now, if Rob Brandt decides, hey, I still want to get an interim fight in between, I think it's very possible that WBA can order Murata to face Eubank, and I think Eubank would go after that mandatory fight just because he's looking for bigger name opponents, and Murata's a top guy. Now, it would be top rank working with PBC, but if it's a mandatory fight, they'd have to come together for the fight. I think very possible this could happen if Murata and Rob Brandt don't lock up in a rubber match. But I honestly think my honest opinion is that Rob Brandt is going to take the fight no matter what because he doesn't want to miss out on the rubber match with with Murata. I think Top Rank and Bob Arum are going to push him in that direction because they want the rubber match with Murata on Top Rank. They want that to happen. And if he takes the risk, if Murata goes against Eubank and Eubank becomes the interim champion, then that leaves Rob Brandt out of the chance at a world title in the picture, because there's no way, unless Rob Brandt's the mandatory down the road, that Eubank's going to want to face him. So that's what I think is going to happen. But again, I think Murata's still possible. Now, number 8 is Rob Brandt. I don't see Eubank and Rob Brandt facing each other. I guess they could possibly come together for it if pushed hard enough, but I don't think Eubank's going to push hard enough to face Rob Brandt. It's PBC working with Top Rank, and I just can't see that going down. Number 9 at middleweight is the undefeated former junior middleweight champion, Jaime Munguia. He's with Golden Boy. Eubank is with the PBC, and Eubank is going after other bigger fights. So I don't see him facing off against. Eubank facing off against a guy like Jaime Munguia. The cross promotion thing just not going to happen. Not to say he wouldn't want it, but it's just they're not going to come together, in my opinion. And then number 10 is a rematch with Matt Korobov. You know, I wouldn't completely rule it out. Korobov might be desperate to get a big name in the ring, and Eubank might be desperate just to stay busy. They're both with the PBC. It's a makeable fight. And Eubank, he's a prideful guy. I'm sure he's not happy about the way the fight ended, and he'd probably want to say, hey, look, I want to leave no doubt. He'd probably have more of an advantage and be a better favorite going into a rematch anyways, because by the time they get in the ring, Korobov will be recovering from a shoulder injury and out of the ring even longer than before, plus he's an older fighter. So I wouldn't completely rule it out. Now, that's the top 10. Now, what do I think Chris Eubank's going to do next? I honestly don't know. I'm really hoping that something falls in place for this guy, though, because he deserves it, man. I'm tired of seeing Chris Eubank, a very good fighter who's willing to face anybody, getting snuffed out. Because he's not like Demetrius Andrade, where he has that ugly style. He has a very attractive style. He just can take punches, and I think because he's not a super big name, I think that's why he gets avoided. But it's also his promotion and who he's dealing with. He always seems to be with somebody where either at super middleweight or at middleweight, there's not a lot of guys that are with the same promotion, so the fights are harder to make. You know, but when he signed on with PBC and got James DeGale in last year, he took advantage of that and whipped DeGale's ass. But he's still with the PBC. Not a lot of, there's a couple guys there. In the top 10, there's 4 PBC fighters, but the problem is, one of them's Korobov, who he already beat, you know, and is going to be out for a while with that shoulder injury. The other is 2 guys that are likely fighting each other in Charlo and Derevyanchenko. So we're going to see. We're going to see if something falls in place for Chris Eubank, but I really hope it does because I really like the guy. All right, guys, that's the what's next on WBA interim middleweight champion, Chris Eubank Jr. Hope you enjoyed it. My number 6 middleweight in the world. Hope you enjoyed it. True boxing. You've been hit with the truth.